Welcome back. 3 Senate Democrats are suing to block President Trump's appointment of Matt Whitaker as Attorney General. They argue President Trump violated the Constitution's Appointments Clause because Whitaker has not been confirmed by the Senate. And they are not alone. The Maryland Attorney General filed a lawsuit last week as well. Whitaker has drawn scrutiny for his past statements as a TV pundit, criticizing the special counsel investigation. President Trump denied that he chose Whitaker to replace Jeff Sessions for that very reason.
I did not know he took views on the Mueller investigation as such.
And when you found that out?
I don't think it had any effect. What do you do when a person's right? There is no collusion. He happened to be right. I mean, he said it. So if he said there is collusion, I'm supposed to be taking somebody that says there is.
However, a source close to Whitaker tells NBC News that he intentionally tried to catch the president's attention by raising his profile as a CNN legal commentator. So why would President Trump appoint Whitaker outside the Justice Department's typical line of succession? I'm joined now by Rhode Island Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, one of the 3 senators filing the lawsuit. That's a big question about why he chose Whitaker of all people. First of all, I want to get your lawsuit. You're saying the president violates the Constitution in the advice and consent clause of the Appointments Clause. The president and the DOJ argue that the president is just acting under the Federal Vacancies Act. And there are 3 ways where you can appoint someone under the Federal Vacancies Act. One is designating the deputy to take charge. Another one is choosing someone nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate for a different job. And the other one is naming someone serving in a position, a senior position, in the relevant agency for at least 90 days. Whitaker fits that third part of the Federal Vacancies Act.
Well, maybe, but there's a much more specific provision as a matter of law, statutory law, that provides a distinct order of succession in the Department of Justice. And when Rod Rosenstein, who was next in the order of succession, was reviewed and confirmed by the Senate, it was with the prospect in mind that part of the Deputy Attorney General's responsibilities are to take over and fill in those spots. Nobody had ever heard of this fellow Whitaker at the time. Moreover, the Constitution ultimately controls and says that the principal offices of the United States shall be filled with the advice and consent of the Senate. And the way that the president has gone about this creates not only a violation in this case, but a roadmap for future violations to skirt around the problem of advice and consent.
So are you saying...
And when you look at why that...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you look at why that was put in there, it was to protect the public against a president who might put flunkies or cronies or incompetents in office because they had a greater loyalty to the person of the president than to the public they were there to serve. That's kind of the stated purpose of that clause. So it's very applicable in this instance.
So if you're arguing with the Appointments Clause that it overrules essentially the DOJ, it overrules the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, so a federal judge would basically call into question the legality of the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, at least in that last category where you're talking about a senior position in the relevant agency for more than 90 days.
Yeah, because one of the things that has been a little bit covering the predicament that a president might find himself in the event of a sudden or an unplanned vacancy, somebody has to do the job for a while. It can take a while to get advice and consent. Who do you fill in the meantime? Fortunately, there are 2 traditions here. One is that somebody who's Senate confirmed should be the person who fills in. And the second is, again, in the case of the Department of Justice, there's actually a law that specifies who it should be. So they're going way outside the bounds, both of the succession plan and of the tradition of Senate confirmed appointments, to bring somebody in who is, I think, unqualified for the position, but also does not have even the hint of any advice and consent approval by the Senate. And if they can get away with it in this circumstance, they could do it again with other cabinet officers.
The Mueller investigation is ongoing. There's some urgency to your lawsuit. Do you expect it to get a ruling anytime soon?
Well, the government has the chance to answer. And we, of course, have the ability to ask for a temporary restraining order or injunctive relief at some point. But at the moment, we've simply filed the complaint asking for declaratory relief. And I think we'll see what happens in the next few days. We'll see whether he recuses himself or whether he tries to interfere in the investigation. We're at least ready to go into court because the complaint has been filed. And of course, we need to hear from the executive branch because I think they're going to defend against this.
So there are some Republicans that seem to be uncomfortable with Whitaker or question the legality of Whitaker's appointment. Trey Gowdy is one of them. So is Lindsey Graham. Why haven't you gotten any? You're laughing. Why haven't you gotten any Republicans to sign on to this
even
lawsuit?
John Yoo wrote a piece saying that his appointment was unconstitutional. I think it's pretty widely accepted that his appointment is at the very bounds of constitutionality, and that we feel very confident, the three of us who brought the case, that we stand way better than even a likelihood of winning this and putting the advice and consent imprimatur back onto the Department of Attorney General.
Are your Republican counterparts pressuring the president to name someone, to nominate somebody into that role quickly?
I do not know. There certainly isn't any public pressure. There's been no names that have been floated or vetted that seem to me to be very serious. Under the Act, they have as much as 209 days until they even have to nominate somebody. And then once that person is nominated, they could slow walk the nomination so that Whitaker could be there for a very, very long time, which is part of the problem and part of why we think a court should settle this question of whether this is proper.
In looking at whether Trump will try to be more involved with his DOJ, he was pretty angry with AG Sessions when he had the job, when Sessions didn't push back on the Mueller investigation and Sessions recused himself from it. He was angry he didn't protect the president. When he was asked about Whitaker by Chris Wallace yesterday, he said Whitaker will be able to do what he wants. It's going to be up to him when it comes to the Mueller investigation. He says he's very astute politically and a very smart person. Why don't we see the same pushback from the president on Whitaker that we saw with Sessions?
Well, first of all, Whitaker isn't recused, so he has the ability to go in and mess around. He has said that he would look at the ethics officials in the Department of Justice, get their opinion, but we've had no news about what took place or whether they've given him an opinion. It strikes me that he ought to be recused and that all of this would be completely improper. But what you also see the president doing is very, fairly simple, actually, semaphore, letting this guy know, by the way, you should make this decision. By the way, whatever you do, it's up to you. You're smart. You're politically astute. It's really hard not to kind of get the joke of where the president is leading Whitaker and what he wants.
Chuck Grassley is leaving the Senate Judiciary Committee to go chair, I believe, the Finance Committee. It looks like that right now. Lindsey Graham will probably take over as chair. What do you think of Lindsey Graham as chair of Judiciary?
Well, he and I have had a superb relationship in the subcommittee that he chaired and I was the ranking member of on crime and terror. And we did some very important hearings in the Russia investigation. We've done a lot of other work. We got the measure passed to protect our relations with Great Britain and exchange information in the national security space there. So I've worked with him very, very well, and I would have no hesitancy about him coming on as chairman of Judiciary. He's very bright. He's a very able lawyer. And as I said, we've had this great relationship that's worked very well.
You know, I talked to him about that just the other day, and he told me that one of the first things he's going to want to do is call a hearing to talk about dark money and making sure that all money that goes into politics becomes more transparent so you can trace it. A 501c4 is what he'd like to see. Don't you have legislation that would do that?
I've got the bill for that, and I think it's been given a whole lot more impetus once we learned that it wasn't just the Koch brothers who were hiding their hands behind these dark money shadows, but that any foreigner could do it as well. If you can hide the hand of American special interests, you can just as easily hide the hand of foreign governments and foreign special interests. So I think the days of dark money are numbered, and that's a really good thing for our democracy.
He cited the exact same thing, so I guess that's one issue where you might find some bipartisan support, at least
so there we go.
At least some. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, keep us apprised of whatever happens with that.
Will do.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.